In this video, we are diving into Shazam, Fury of the Gods. We will break down the storyline, give a clear summary of the plot, and take a closer look at the cast and their character. We will also explore the film production detail and examine its box office performance. Finally, we will share an honest review along with personal reaction. So let's get started. Before we jump into plot detail or character arc, let's slow down and talk about why this film is worth discussing in the film's place. At a time when superhero movies are everywhere, when caps and CGI battle dominate the box office, it takes some time a little different to stand out. Shazam Fury of the God may not be the loudest or the darkest entry in the DC universe because it represents something important within the genre. First, let's talk about genre. This is not just a superhero movie, it is a fantasy comedy wrap inside a superhero framework. While many comic book films lean toward seriousness, moral darkness, or complex multi universe storytelling, Shazam embrace something lighter. It stands out that the core of the concept is playful. A teenager who turns into an adult superhero by saying a magic word. That idea alone gives the film a unique tone. It blends coming of age theme with mythological fantasy and action spectrum. And that blend matters. Superhero fatigue has become a common discussion in film criticism. Audience often complain that film feel repetitive. But Shazam, Fury of the Gods remind us that the superhero genre can still experiment with tone. It mixes Greek mythology with high school insecurity. It combines dragon and magical stuff with foster family dinner. That tonal balancing act make it a fascinating subject for discussion. Now let's shift to the director David F. Steinberg. Steinberg's background is especially interesting. Before directing superhero film, he was known for hero movies like Light Out of an Annabella creation. That horror influence subtly shaped his superhero storytelling. Notice how some of the mythological creature that horror influence subtly shape superhero storytelling. Notice how some of the mythological creature that feel slightly darker, slightly more intense than what you might expect from family friendly superhero film. There is a tension underneath the horror. Steinberg does not just focus on exposition and spectacle. He focuses on character creation. He allows emotional beats to breathe. Even in large action scenes, he keeps the camera grounded in character perspective. That stylistic choice make the chaos feel more personal. Instead of overwhelming the audience with pure CGI, he anchors scenes in emotional stakes, especially Billy's fears of not being enough. Then there is the production style, which deserves careful attention. This film operates on a bigger scale than the first Shazam movie. The visual effects are more ambitious. The creatures are larger. The mythology is expanded. You can feel the studio aiming for epic fantasy, almost bordering on something you might see in high fantasy franchise. At the same time, the color palette remains bright and bold. The superhero suits are vibrant. The magical effect glow with saturated blues and gold. This create a contrast with other DC films, which often favor darker tones and muted colors. That production choice reinforces the film's identity. It wants to be fun, energetic, and visually playful. But what truly makes this film worth discussing is its position within the broader DC landscape. Released during a transitional period for DC Studios, the movie carries the weight of uncertainty about the future of the franchise. That context influences how audience perceive it. It becomes more than just a sequel. It becomes part of a larger conversation about where superhero storytelling is heading. So as we being discussing Shazam Furry of the Gold, we are not just reviewing another cap adventure. We are examining a film that experiments with tone inside a crowded genre, that blends mythology with teenage insecurity, and that reflects a studio navigating change. It's colorful yet conflicted, playful yet pressured, and that tension between fun and franchise expectation is exactly why this movie deserves our attention. Shazam! Furry of the Go 2023 had an estimated production budget of approximately 110 to 125 million dollars. From a financial standpoint, this placed the film in the mid-range category for modern superhero movies. It was not produced at the extremely high budget level seen in major ensemble crossover film, but it was significantly more expensive than many standard action or fantasy releases. The increase in spending compared to the first Shazam film reflect a common sequel strategy: expand the scale, increase visual spectacle, and invest most heavily in production value. A large portion of the budget was likely allocated to visual effects. The sequel expanded its fantasy and mythological element, introducing large-scale creatures, magical weaponry, city-wide destruction sequence, and a dragon-like antagonist. These elements require advanced CGI development, including digital modeling, animation, compositing, and extending post-production work. In superhero film, visual effect can count for a substantial percentage of total cost, often representing one of the expensive component of production because this film leaned more heavily into mythological fantasy than its predecessor. Post-production demand were likely higher. Cast salaries would have formed another significant part of the overall spending. A returning lead actor Zachary Levi, along with the ensemble portraying the Shazam family, represented recurring contractual costs typical of franchise sequel. Additionally, the introduction of high-profile actors such as Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu likely increased above-the-line expenses. Established performers with international recognition often command higher salaries, particularly when attached to globally distributed studio projects. These casting decisions reflect a strategic investment in star power to broaden audience appeal. Production design and set construction also contributed meaningfully to the overall cost. Along CGI play a central role in superhero film. Physical sets are still required to ground performance and support camera work. The movie includes fantasy environment, large scale action genres, and detailed magical props, all of which require design team fabrication and coordination. Even when digital enhancements dominate the final image, practical elements remain essential during filming. Stunt coordination, action choreography, and safety logistics further increase expenses. Large battle scenes require trained stunt performer, rigging system, insurance coverage, and detailed rehearsal schedules. Location shooting, transportation of equipment, and coordination of large crew also add operational costs that accumulate over time. Superhero films typically involve longer shooting schedule compared to smaller dramas, which increase labor and equipment rental expenses. When compared to other superhero films, this budget sit below the largest entries in the DC and Marvel franchises, many of which exceed $200 million in production cost alone. However, it is notably higher than the reported budget of the first Shazam film, which was produced for roughly $80 to $100 million. The increase demonstrates a calculated attempt to elevate the sequel scale while remaining financially controlled. It aligns closely with mid-tier franchise entries such as standalone character sequel that emphasize character-driven storytelling but still require significant visual spectacle. In addition to production cost, marketing and global distribution likely added tens of millions more to the total financial commitment. When promotional expenses are considered, the overall investment may have approached or exceeded $200 million. From a business perspective, this means the film would need to generate roughly 2 to 2.5 times its production budget in worldwide box office revenue to reach profitability. Overall, the production budget of Shazam Fury of the God reflect a balanced strategy. The studio increased investment to enhance spectacle and expand the mythological scope, but it avoided the extreme spending level associated with franchise tentpole events. This moderate blockbuster approach illustrates both ambition and financial cushion within the evolving economic of superhero cinema. This film operates within the superhero genre, but it blends that framework with fantasy and comedy in a way that shapes its overall mood and identity. While many modern superhero films lean toward dark realism or high stake intensity, this film embraces a lighter, more playful atmosphere. Its genre can be significantly influence how the story unfolds, how characters interact, and how the audience express the narrative. At its core, the movie is a superhero adventure built around magical transformation and mythological conflict. However, unlike grounded vigilante stories or politely driven comic adaptation, this film draws heavily from fantasy. The presence of ancient god, magical staff, and mythical creature and larger than life beasts create an atmosphere that feel closer to high fantasy than traditional urban superhero drama. The magical elements are not treated as mysterious or ominous in a horror driven way, but rather as grand and visually extravagant component of spectacle. The overall mood of the film is energetic and colorful. Bright superhero costume, glowing magical effect, and vibrant cityscape contribute to a visually lively tone. The film avoids muted color palette and shadow heavy cinematography that often characterize darker comic book entry. Instead, it leans into saturated hues and stylized shifting, reinforcing its playful identity. This stylistic choice signals to viewer that the film prioritizes fun and accessibility over grim seriousness. Comedy plays a central role in shaping the tone. Much of the humor comes from the contrast between teenage insecurity and adult superhero appearance. The protagonist may look like a fully grown, powerful hero, but emotionally he remains a teenager navigating self doubt and social awkwardness. This dynamic creates a comedic rhythm that punctuates even intense action scenes. Rather than allowing tension to build, uninterrupted, the film frequently inserts jokes or light-hearted exchange. This maintains a buoyant mood even when the stake involve large-scale destruction or mythological revenge. In terms of pacing, the film moves at a steady but occasionally uneven rhythm. Action sequences are large and fast-paced, filled with visual effect and dynamic movement. The scenes are designed to feel grand and spectacular, emphasizing scale and energy. However, the narrative also slowed down for family-centered moments. Scenes involving the foster sibling provide emotional grounding and create tonal contrast. This quieter sequence shift the mood from explosion fantasy to intimate coming of age drama. The alternation between spectacle and family bonding shape the film overall flow. Atmospherically, the film balances two distinct energies. On one side, this is the epic fantasy tension driven by ancient gods seeking revenge. On the other hand, there is a warmth and humor rooted in themes of belonging and self worth. The villains contribute to a slightly more serious undercurrent, introducing a tone of mythic consequence. Their motivation are tied to time, legacy, and power, which elevate the scale of conflict beyond everyday crime fighting. Yet the film does not allow this mythological way to fully darken the mood. Instead, it keep returning to character-driven, human, and emotionally sincerity. Stylistically, the movie emphasizes spectacle. Visual effects dominate many scenes, especially during creature battle and large confrontation. The camera often frame heroes against massive backdrop of destruction or glowing magical forces, reinforcing the grandeur of the fantasy setting. At the same time, close-up shot during emotional conservation remind viewer that the story center on person's growth. This stylistic balance between scale and intimacy mirror the tonal balance between epic adventure and youthful uncertainty. Overall, the genre blend of superhero fantasy and comedy define the movie's atmosphere. It feels adventurous but not oppressive, dramatic but rarely bleak. The mood remains hopeful and energetic even when the narrative introduces danger. By combining mythological spectacle with teenage vulnerability and humor, the film creates a tone that is lighter than many of its genre counterparts. This distinctive mix shapes both its identity in its audience appeal, positioning it as a colorful and emotionally accessible entry within the broader superhero landscape. Before watching this film, audience expectations were shaped by several important factors, including viewers' demographic, anticipated theme, and broader preferences of superhero and fantasy genre fans. As a sequel to a well-liked first film, the movie entered theater carrying both excitement and pressure. Different segments of the audience approach it with different hope depending on age, familiarity with comic book film, and attachment to the DC brand. From a demographic standpoint, the original Shazam attracted a relatively wide audience. Families, teenagers, and young adults were particularly drawn to its mix of superhero action and light-hearted community. Unlike darker comic book adaptation, the first film felt accessible to younger viewers while still entertaining adults. As a result, many families likely expected the sequel to maintain that same balance. Parents may have anticipated a film that was safe for teenagers but still visually impressive. Younger viewers, especially those in their early teens, may have expected relatable themes about growing up, friendships, and belonging. Teenager audience in particularly likely carried strong expectations in the sequel. The core concept of a teenager transforming into a powerful adult superhero resonates strongly with adults, Lee and viewer navigating identity and self-confidence. Before watching the movie, many likely anticipated further exploration of insecurity, responsibility, and the tension between childhood and adulthood. Because the protagonist struggles with feeling not good enough, viewer in that age group may have expected emotional growth alongside the action. Adult superhero fan, on the other hand, may have approached the film with more cautious expectation. The broader superhero landscape has evolved significantly, with audience becoming accustomed to interconnected cinematic universe, large crossover event, and high-stake world building. For these, viewer expectation might have centered on how the sequel would expand its mythology. The introduction of ancient god and mythological villains likely signal a larger narrative scope. Genre fan may have expected deeper lore, more elaborate action sequence, and a stronger connection to the wider DC universe. At the same time, the DC brand itself influenced anticipation. By the time these sequels were released, DC film had delivered a mix of tonal approaches. By the time this sequel was released, DC film had delivered a mix of tonal approaches, ranging from darker character studies to epic ensemble battle. Some viewers might have expected the sequel to shift toward a more serious tone to align with other franchise entries. Others likely hope it would remain faithful to its lighter comedic identity. This tension between franchise consistency and tonal uniqueness shape expectations significantly. Genre fan of fantasy also had specific anticipation. The inclusion of mythological figure and magical artifacts suggested a stronger fantasy emphasis than the first film. Viewers who enjoy high fantasy storytelling may have expected grand visual effect, creature battle, and immersive magical environment. The promise of dragon and divine conflict likely raise expectation for large-scale spectacle. Fans of epic fantasy franchises may have hoped the film would lean fully into its mythological potential, delivering visually ambitious sequence and imaginative world building. Comedy fan formed another important segment of the anticipated audience. The humor in the first installment was a defining feature, and many viewers likely expected the sequel to maintain that helpful tone. Anticipation may have centered on witty dialogue, situational comedy, and the contrast between teenager immaturity and adult superhero appearance. For this group, maintaining charm and personality would have been more important than escalating intensity. There was also expectation related to sequel structure itself. Sequels are often expected to be bigger than their predecessor. Viewers likely anticipated high stakes, stronger villains, and more elaborate action scenes. A sequel typically promises escalation, more power, more danger, more spectacle. Therefore, many audience members probably enter the film expecting a noticeable expansion in scale and ambition compared to the original. In addition, awareness of franchise transition may have influenced perception before viewing. Some audience might have approached the film with uncertainty about the long-term direction of the DC cinematic universe. This would have created tempered expectation regarding overarching continuity or future setup. Overall, studio expectation before watching this film were shaped by demographic appeal, genre familiarity, and franchise content. Family expected fun and accessibility. Teenager anticipated relatable emotional theme. Fantasy and superhero fan look for larger mythological state and impressive action. Comedy fan hope for continued humor and charm. These layer expectation created a complex viewing environment with different group evaluated the film based on distinct priorities even before the opening scene began. This film is designed for a broad but clearly defined audience, combining superhero spectacle with family-centered theme and light fantasy adventure. While it belongs to the large comic book movie category, its tone, humor, and emotional focus suggests that this is not primarily aimed for at viewers seeking dark realism or complex political storytelling. Instead, the film is crafted for you audience who appreciate energetic action, accessible humor, and heartfelt message about belonging and growth. In terms of age group, the movie is especially well suited for teenager and young adult. The central character is a teenager struggling with insecurity, responsibility, and the fear of growing up. These themes resonate strongly with viewers in their early teens through their early 20s. Adolescent navigating identity formation, peer relationship, and self-doubt may find the emotional arc relatable. The fantasy concept of transforming into a powerful superhero while still feeling uncertain inside mirror the real life experience of young people adjusting to new expectation and responsibility. At the same time, the film is appropriate for family viewing. Its tone remains largely light and playful, avoiding excessive darkness or disturbing imagery. While it contains action sequence and mythological creature, the presentation is stylized rather than graphic. This makes it accessible to older children and early teenagers when viewed with parental audience. guidance. Families who enjoy watching superhero movies together are likely the part of the intended audience. The foster family dynamic at the heart of the story reinforces this appeal, emphasizing unity, support, and emotional connection. Young adult viewer who grew up watching superhero film may also be the part of the target demographic. This group often appreciate nostalgia blended with modern visual effect. Because the film balances humor with spectacle, it offers entertainment without demanding deep prior knowledge of complex cinematic universe. Casual fan of superhero cinema, those who enjoy the genre but do not closely follow every installment, can engage with the story without feeling excluded. Regarding interest, the film is made for people who enjoy fantasy element combined with action. The conclusion of action, god, magical artifact, and mythical creatures signal a strong appeal to fantasy enthusiasts. Viewers who enjoy stories involving time power, enchanted project, and epic battle will likely find the visual spectacle engaging. However, the fantasy elements are presented in a mainstream accessible style rather than a dense or lore heavy format. This makes the film appealing to those who enjoy fantasy theme without necessarily wanting complex world building. Comedy is another important interest area. The humor in the film, particularly the contrast between teenage emotion and adult superhero appearance, create a playful tone throughout much of the narrative. Viewers who appreciate light-hearted banter, situational comedy, and character-driven jokes are the part of the intended audience. The comedic approach softens the intensity of the action scene and make the film more inviting to those who might not prefer darker superhero stories. In terms of genre preferences, the movie is aimed at fan of superhero adventure that emphasize optimism and character growth over moral ambiguity. Unlike more sober or introspective comic book adaptations, this film leans toward hopefulness and emotional warmth. Viewers who prefer vibrant visual and clear heroes versus villain conflict and uplifting resolution are likely to respond positively. Those who favor gritty realism, complex anti-heroes, or slow-paced philosophical drama may not find it as aligned with their taste. The movie also appeals to audience who value an ensemble cast. The Shazam family dynamic provide multiple characters with distinct personality. Viewers who enjoy team-based superhero narrative where relationships are as important as battle are the part of the film core demographic. The emphasis on cooperation and family bond make it particularly attractive to viewers who enjoy emotionally driven storytelling with an action framework. Overall, this film is made for teenager families and casual superhero fans who appreciate a mix of fantasy spectacle and heartfelt theme. It targets viewers who enjoy energetic pacing, colorful visual, and accessible humor. While it may not primarily serve audience seeking darker or more complex comic book narrative, it effectively addresses those looking for an entertaining, emotionally grounded superhero adventure that balances action with warmth and relatability. This promises an this promises an emotional experience that blends excitement, humor, and heartfelt sincerity. While it is structured as a large-scale superhero adventure, its emotional core is grounded in personal insecurity, family bond, and the fear of growing up. The movie does not aim to overwhelm viewer with darkness or tragedy. Instead, it offers an accessible emotional journey that balances spectacle with warmth. In terms of mood, the film is establishing an atmosphere that is energetic and colorful. From the beginning, the tone suggests fun and adventure rather than solemn intensity. Bright visual, dynamic action scene, and comedic exchange create a lively emotional environment. The mood invites viewers to feel entertained and uplifted rather than anxious or burdened. Even when the stake rise and mythological traits merge, the film maintains a sense of playfulness that this consistent tonal approach signal that the audience can expect excitement without emotional heaviness. However, beneath the surface of humor and fantasy, the film introduces themes that give depth to its emotional promise. One of the central themes is self-doubt. The protagonist struggles with feeling inadequate as a hero and fear that he is not strong enough to protect those he cares about. This internal conflict shapes much of the emotional experience. Viewers are encouraged to connect with vulnerability rather than just physical power. The story suggests that heroism is not about perfection but about courage and commitment despite fear. And there is an important theme is family, especially chosen family. The foster family dynamic creates moment of warmth and sincerity throughout the film. Scenes involving shared meals, disagreement, and reconciliation offer emotional grounding amid the chaos of magical battles. The intended impact of these moments is to create a sense of belonging and comfort. The audience is meant to feel that relationship, not power, are the true source of strength. This emotional message resonates particularly with younger viewers who may relate to feeling of searching for identity and acceptance. The movie also touches on the theme of growing up, the tension between wanting to remain a child and needing to accept adult responsibility add a layer of bittersweet emotion. There is a subtitle melancholy in the idea that childhood can't last forever. While the film keeps this theme within a hopeful framework, it acknowledges the difficulty of transition. The intended emotional impact here is reflective rather than tragic. Viewers may feel a gentle sense of nostalgia recognition as the protagonist's comfort change. Action sequence contribute to the emotional rhythm of the film. Large scale battle and confrontation are designed to generate excitement and adrenaline. The presence of mythological creature and magical destruction add granular amplifying the sense of danger. These scene promises intensity, but they are structured in a way that avoid prolonged despair. Instead of leaving the audience in a sustained tension, the film frequently reintroduce humor or heartfelt dialogue to restore balance. This pacing ensures that the emotional journey remains dynamic rather than overwhelming. Hope is another key emotional thread, even when the story introduces formidable and antagonists and seemingly impossible odds. The narrative tone signals that resilience and unity will prevail. The intended effect is motivational rather than unsettling. Viewers are meant to leave the film feeling uplifted, reassures that courage and loyalty can overcome adversity. The emotional arc moves from insecurity and doubt toward confidence and affirmation. Importantly, the film does not promise deep psychological complexity or moral ambiguity. Instead, it offers clarity in its emotional messaging. Good and evil are relatively distant, and the protagonist's journey follows a recognizable pattern of growth. This straightforward emotional structure makes this experience accessible to a wide audience. It prioritizes relatability and warmth over philosophical exploration. Overall, the emotional experience promised by this film is one of balance. It combines humor with sincerity, spectacle with intimacy, and tension with reassurance. The mood remains hopeful and energetic, while the theme of family, self-warmth, and maturity provide emotional grounding. The intended impact is to entertain while gently inspiring, leaving viewer with a sense of connection, optimism, and renewed appreciation for the power of belonging. At its core, this film is not simply a story about supernatural battles or mythological revenge. Beneath its fantasy surface, the film revolves around an abstract and deeply human idea. The tension between power and maturity, the narrative uses magical transformation as a metaphor for emotional growth, asking what is truly mean to be worthy of strength. Through its theme, message, and overarching story concept, the film explores identity, responsibility, belonging, and the fragile bridge between childhood and adulthood. The central story concept is built around duality. A young person possesses extraordinary ability that far exceed his emotional development. This contrast forms the philosophical backbone of the narrative. The film suggests that external power does not automatically create internal confidence. One may appear strong, even invincible, while still feeling uncertain and small inside. The transformation from teenager to superhero is therefore symbolic. It represents the way individuals are often expected to perform adulthood before they fully understand themselves. The same theme of self warmth operates at the center of the film's message. The protagonist does not primarily struggle against physical enemies. He is struggle against the fear that he is inadequate. This insecurity is framed not as weakness but as a natural part of growth. The story possesses that doubt is not evidence of failure but a stage on the path towards self realization. True strength, the narrative implies, lies in resistance rather than perfection. Another major theme is responsibility. Power in this story is not treated as pure fantasy fulfillment. Instead, it becomes a burden that demands sacrifice. The film questions whether one is defined by abilities or by choices. The message emphasizes that heroism is measured not by the scale of one's power but by the willingness to protect others despite fear. In abstract terms, the narrative argues that maturity begins when one accepts accountability for consequence. Particularly, family chosen family serve as the emotional framework through which these ideas unfold. The story does not isolate it hero in solitude. Instead, it places him within a network of relationships that both support and challenge him. This reinforces a broader message. Identity is not formed in isolation but through connection. Belonging is portrayed as a source of stability in time of uncertainty. The concept of family becomes symbolic of community. The idea that strength is amplified through unity. The antagonist force in the narrative represents more than external threat. In abstract language, it embodies a consequence of imbalance. The good who seek to reclaim stolen power symbolize the disruptive cause when forces exceed human capacity to manage them. Their present introduce the theme of cosmic order versus human ambition. The story hints at the idea that power without harmony invites chaos. This elevates the conflict from personal insecurity to universal equilibrium. Growth as a theme is treated with both optimism and melancholy. The narrative acknowledges that growing up involves letting go of certain illusions. The desire to remain a child to avoid the weight of responsibility is portrayed as understandable but unsustainable. The message suggests that maturity is not the abandonment of wonder but the integration of wonder and accountability. The protagonist's journey reflects the universal experience of realizing childhood is not defined by age but by choice. The film's abstract message also touches on legacy. The presence of an ancient mythological figure introduces a contrast between old and new tradition and adaptation. The story suggests that inheritance, whether of power, culture, or responsibility, must be reshaped by those who receive it. The younger generation is not meant to replicate the past but to reinterpreted. This reflects a broader philosophical concept. Progress emerges when inherited structure are questioned and transformed. At its deepest level, the film's core idea revolves around transformation as a metaphor. The magical word that trigger physical change symbolize moments in life when individuals are forced to confront who they are becoming. Transformation is sudden in appearance but gradual in meaning. While the character can instantly appear older and stronger, his emotional elevation unfolds slowly. This contrast underscores the message but that true change can't be rushed by external force. The intended message of the story is hopefully it asserts that fear and doubt are not obstacle to heroism but a component of it. Courage is not the absence of insecurity, it is action taken despite insecurity. The film progresses that strength rooted in love and loyalty surpasses strength rooted in ego. Power without empathy lead to destruction, but power guided by connection lead to protection. Ultimately, the core idea of this film is about alignment, aligning inner belief with outer ability, aligning personal growth with communal responsibility, aligning inherited power with earned wisdom. Through fantasy, spectral, and mythological conflict, the story communicates a universal truth. Becoming who you are meant to be requires forcing facing your own uncertainty. True heroism in abstract term is not about defeating good. It is about learning to believe that you are worthy of the gift you hold and choosing to use them for other rather than yourself. The central conflict of this film operates in two interconnected levels: an external struggle over power and internal struggle over worthiness. While the narrative present grand forces and large scale opposition, the deeper tension lies in the moral and psychological phase between the responsibility and self doubt. The conflict is not simply about defeating an adversary, it is about reconciling who one is with or who one is expected to be. At its heart, the story explores a moral dilemma tied of power. Extraordinary abilities are placed in the hand of someone still navigated emotional growth. This creates a fundamental tension: should immense power belong to those who have not yet fully matured? The film invites reflection on whether capability alone justified authority. The protagonist faces the challenge of proving that he deserves what he has been given, not through raw strength but through character. The moral question becomes clear: is heroism defined by possession of power or by wisdom to wield it responsibly? Dilemma generate internal conflict. The character insecurity become a persistent undercurrent. Doubt function almost like an invisible antagonist, challenging every decision and amplifying every failure. The tension arises from the fear of inadequacy, the worry that one's limitation might harm others. This internal struggle intensifies the stake of the larger narrative because it reframes every challenge as a test of identity. The central conflict is therefore not merely about survival or victory, it is about self definition. Simultaneously, the external opposition represents a philosophical challenge. It embodies a belief that power has been misplaced, that it has disrupted our natural moral order. The tension emerges from clashes perspective about legitimacy. One side views power as something inherited and scarred, the other view it as something chosen and transformative. This ideological divide elevates the conflict beyond physical confrontation. It becomes a debate over who has the right to shape the future. Another significant moral dilemma revolves around responsibility toward others. The protagonist is not isolated, he is the part of a family like collective. This creates a tension between individual desire and communal obligation. There is an ongoing challenge of balancing personal fear with collective expectation. Protecting others often requires sacrifice, and the story faces emphasis on the cost of stepping into leadership. The conflict asks whether one can prioritize safety and comfort over duty, or when majority demand accepting risk for the sake of others. Trust also play a crucial role in shaping the tension. Relationships are tested by uncertainty when facing overwhelming challenges. Doubt can spread, affecting not only by self-perception but group cohesion. The central conflict therefore includes the strain placed on unity. Can bond endure when confronted with fear and pressure? The moral undertone suggests that strength is fragile if it is not reinforced by mutual belief. The emotional complexity add to the border struggle. The concept of legacy introduces another layer of tension. The presence of older forces questioning the legitimacy of new power create a generational conflict. This is an implicit challenge between tradition and change. There is an implicit challenge between tradition and change. The story raises the question of whether the past should dedicate the present. The central conflict reflects a universal human experience, inheriting system and expectation while attempting to redefine them. The tension emerges from resistance to transformation. On a deeper level, the conflict explores identity fragmentation. The protagonist embodied two distinct selves, one outwardly powerful and the other inwardly uncertain. The gap between these identities fuel ongoing tension. There is a moral challenge in reconciling appearance with authenticity. If the world sees strength, does that erase vulnerability, or does true growth require acknowledging both? This internal contradiction become symbolic of the larger narrative struggle. Fear of failure intensify the conflict, the possibility that mistake could have irreversible consequence heighten emotional stake. The character must confront the reality that responsibility does not come with guarantee of success. This uncertainty creates psychological pressure, the tension lie in accepting despite the possibility of loss, in choosing courage without assurance of victory. Ultimately, the central conflict is about alignment. It is the struggle to align power with majority belief with action, and inheritance with choice. The moral dilemmas presenting in the film revolve around worthiness, accountability, and trust. The challenge extend beyond physical threats to include emotional resilience and ethical clarity. The tension persists because growth is neither immediate nor effortless. In abstract terms, the conflict asks whether strength can coexist with vulnerability, whether youth can carry responsibility, and whether unity can withstand doubt. The resolution of this conflict does not simply determine who prevails, it defines what kind of hero emerges. This film explores a range of themes that extend beyond its surface as a superhero fantasy. Beneath the spectacle and humor, the film engages with ethical questions about power and legitimacy. Emotional arcs center on identity and belonging, cultural topics related to family structure, generational tension, and modern heroism. These thematic layers shape the narrative depth and give meaning to its larger than life conflict. One of the most prominent themes is the ethical question of worthiness. The story consistently whether power alone qualifies someone to lead or protect other. The protagonist possesses extraordinary abilities yet struggle with insecurity and immaturity. This contrast raises the moral inquiry: should strength be granted based on potential, or must it earn through demonstrated responsibility? The film does not present power as inherently virtuous. Instead, it suggests that ethical character determines the value of strength. This theme resonates with broader discussion about authority in society, whose deserve influence, and how the legitimacy is measured. Closely related is the theme of accountability. The film emphasizes that action carry consequence, especially when amplified by supernatural ability. The ethical tension lies in recognizing that mistake made by a powerful individual can have wide-reaching impact. Through its emotional progression, the narrative illustrates that maturity involves accepting responsibility rather than avoiding it. Growth is depicted as a willingness to face the outcome of one's choice. The moral arc reinforces the idea that leadership is inseparable from accountability. Family and belonging form another central thematic pillar. The story places strong emphasis on chosen family rather than traditional biological tie. The foster family dynamic highlight themes of alien trust and sheer identity emotionally. The arc of belonging addresses require mutual commitment. This exploration of non-traditional family structure reflects a broader culture shift toward recognizing diverse form of kinship. The film subtly affirms that family is defined by loyalty and care rather than by blood alone. The emotional arc of self-acceptance runs parallel to the relational theme. The protagonist's journey revolves around reconciling insecurity with outward strength. This internal conflict reflects a universal human experience, feeling inadequate despite external expectation. The film explores the tension between appearance and authenticity, suggesting that vulnerability does not negate heroism, instead it becomes part of it. This theme speaks to contemporary culture conservation about mental health and emotional openness, particularly among young people. The narrative normalized doubt as part of growth rather than as a sign of failure. Generational conflict also merges as a cultural topic. The antagonist forces in the story represent older system of power and tradition. Their resistance to change create an ideological clash between past and present. This theme mirrors real world tension between established authenticity and emerging perspective. The film subtly question whether inherited structure should remain unchallenged by presenting younger characters who reinterpret power rather than replicate it. The storyline with culture narrative about progress and adaptation. Another theme explores the balance between individuality and collective identity. While the protagonist has unique ability, he operates within a team. The narrative suggests that heroism is not purely individualistic. Cooperation, trust, and shared purpose as are portrayed as are essential component of success. This emphasis on teamwork reflects a culture preferences for collaborative strength over solitary dominance. This ethical implication is that no individual, regardless of power, can thrive without community. The concept of sacrifice adds further emotional depth. The story suggests that genuine heroism may operate personal loss or discomfort. This theme underscores a broader ethical principle, the willingness to prioritize other above oneself. Sacrifice is not portrayed as tragic martyrdom but as a conscious choice rooted in love and responsibility. Through this arc, the film reinforces its message that strength guided by empathy holds greater moral value than strength driven by ego, hope, and resilience. Function an overarching theme despite facing overwhelming challenge. The narrative maintains an optimistic tone. The emotional arc moves from down to affirmation reinforces for the idea that adversity can cata- catalyze growth. This thematic choice reflects a cultural appetite for stories that inspire rather than unset. The film positions resilience not as invulnerability but as persistence in the face of fear. Finally, the theme of identity transformation ties together many of these elements. The physical transformation at the center of the story symbolizes a broader process of becoming. Identity is known as fluid rather than the character must learn to integrate multiple aspects of themselves: strength and vulnerability, independence and connection. This this thematic exploration aligns with contemporary culture discussion about self-definition and authenticity. Overall, this film weaves together ethical questions about legitimacy and responsibility, emotional arc centered on belonging and self-warmth, and cultural topic related to family and diversity, generational change, and collaborative heroism. While framed within a fantastical superhero narrative, its theme reflects enduring human concern about growth, power, and the search for identity in a complex world. The emotional connection in this film grow from its ability to balance spectacle with sincerity. While the film presents magical power and mythological forces and large-scale threat, its emotional core remain intimate and relatable. The story connects with viewers not through complexity alone but through recognizable feelings, self-doubt, loyalty, fear of growing up, and the need to belong. By weaving these universal experiences into a colorful superhero framework, the film invites audience to see themselves with extraordinary circumstances. The overall mood play a significant role in shaping this connection. The tone remain energetic and hopeful rather than dark or oppressive. Bright visuals, playful humor, and dynamic pacing create a welcoming atmosphere. This accessibility allowing viewer to engage emotionally without feeling overwhelmed. The film does not rely on relentless tension. Instead, it alternates between excitement and warmth. That rhythm mirrors real emotional life moment of chaos followed by reassurance. As a result, the audience can invest in the character without emotional exhaustion. One of the strongest emotional bridge between the story and the viewers lie in its exploration of insecurity. The protagonist struggles with feeling inadequate despite possessing immense power. This contrast resonates deeply because it reflects a common human experience. Outward capabilities does not erase inner doubt. Many viewers understand what it feels like to be expected to perform confidently while privately questioning themselves. By presenting a hero who feels unprepared and uncertain, the film lowered the emotional distance between Audience and character strength become relatable rather than intimidating. Themes of belonging and family further deepen the emotional connection. The story emphasizes chosen bonds rather than inherited ones. Viewers who have experienced unconventionally family structure, who have value friendship as family, may find this portrayal affirming. The emotional arc surrounding unity, trust, and sheer responsibility create moments of tenderness that ground the fantasy element. When characters support the one another, argue, reconcile, the emotional stake feel authentic. The audience is reminded that even with happy conflict, relationship remains central. The theme of growing up also enhances the viewer experience. The tension between wanting to remain carefree and needing to concept responsibilities universally understood. Adolescents may see their own anxieties reflected in the protagonist's reluctance to fully embrace adulthood. Adults, on the other hand, may connect through nostalgia, remembering the uncertainty of transition. This dual resonance allows the film to reach across age group. The emotional experience becomes layered, offering identification for younger viewers and reflection for older ones. Humor contributes significantly to emotional accessibility. Comedy softens tension and humanizes character. By allowing moments of awkwardness and playful dialogue, the film creates space for empathy. Laughter becomes a shared experience between audience and character. This sheer amusement strengthens attachment, making dramatic moments feel more impactful when they arrive. The mood never shifts into despair for long. Instead, it maintains a hopeful baseline that reassures viewers. The fantasy element, while grand, serve as metaphor that intensify emotional theme rather than distract from them. Mythological threats and magical transformation amplify internal struggle. The idea of carrying divine power parallel the pressure of expectation placed on young people. The scale of external conflict mirrored the scale of internal fear. By externalizing emotional tension through fantasy, the film allows viewers to process familiar feeling in an imaginative context. This symbolic storytelling enhances engagement. Hope and resilience are central to the emotional journey. Even when doubt and danger rise, the narrative tone signals that growth is possible. The viewer experience is designed to move from uncertainty toward affirmation. The story does not promise perfection, it promises courage despite imperfection. This message creates an uplifting emotional resolution. Audience are encouraged to leave the film feeling reassures that vulnerability does not negate strength. The pacing also support connection. Quieter scene provide room for emotional reflection. Conservation about fear, identity, and loyalty slow the narrative just enough for viewers to internalize the stake. These pauses contrast with action sequence, creating emotional variety. The alternation between intensity and intimacy mirrors the natural fluctuation of human emotion. Ultimately, the film connects emotionally by aligning extraordinary event with ordinary feeling. Its mood remains hopeful and inclusive. Its theme centered on belonging and self worth, and its viewer experience emphasizes relatability over spectral tone by presenting heroism as a journey through doubt rather than display of invincibility. The story invites audience to recognize themselves in its character. The emotional connection emerges not from the scale of power but from the honesty of vulnerability. Now we talk about story invite audience to recognize themselves in its character. The emotional connection emerges not from the scale of power but from the honesty of vulnerability. In this film, the character dynamic remains central to the film identity. While the movie delivers large scale fantasy and superhero spectacle, its emotional weight depends heavily on how the main character evolved. From a reviewer perspective, the character worked best when it focused on personality, contrast, and archetypal growth rather than pure action. At the center is Billy Batson, Shazam portrayed by Zachary Levi. Billy embodies the classic reluctant hero archetype. On the surface, Shazam appears confident, powerful, and charismatic internally. However, Billy struggles with insecurity, impulsiveness, and the fear that he is not worthy of his power. This duality defines his character. As a reviewer, one can see that his personality is built around contradiction. Outward bravado paired with inward self-doubt. Billy's personality traits include humor, emotional sensitivity, protectiveness, and occasional immaturity. His comedic behavior often masks deeper vulnerability. He fears abandonment and worries that his foster family will outgrow him. This emotional undercurrent gives weight to his journey rather than presenting a naturally fearless hero. The film emphasizes growth through insecurity. Billy's transformation into Shazam becomes symbolic, not just physical power but emotional development. The foster siblings also play a crucial role. Freddie Freeman represents loyalty mixed with bold curiosity. Freddie often shows more outward confidence than Billy, sometimes stepping into danger and enthusiasm. His archetype leans toward the devoted best friend who seek purpose and recognition. Faraday's optimism contrasts with Billy's hesitation, highlighting difference a response to power and responsibility. Mary Broomfield stands out as the most grounded and mature member of the group. Her personality reflects responsibility and thoughtfulness. As a reviewer, it is clear that Mary functions as a stabilizing force within the family. She embodies the archetype of the reluctant adult, someone already prepared for responsibility but uncertain about sacrificing personal ambition. Her internal conflict adds subtitle emotional depth to the ensemble. Dorla Dudley and Dorla Dudley. Faith's Herman Megagon God bring warmth and emotional openness. Dorla defining trait are compassion and optimism. She often acts as the emotional heart of the family, reinforcing theme of unity and kindness. Her archetype resembles the innocent believer, reminding the group and the audience of the joy that heroism can inspire. Eugenie Coy represent intelligence and technical skill. His personality leaned toward introversion and analytical thinking. Eugenic archetype fits the strategistic or quiet thinker, balancing the team emotional impulses with logic and planning. From the opposing side, antagonists bring a contrasting energy. Hespera, played by Helen Mirren, embodies composure and authority. Her archetype resembles the display ruler, a figure who believes power has been unjustly taken. Hespera's personality is discipline and control, which contrasts sharply with Billy's insecurity. She projects certainty where he projects doubt. Calais Callisto, portrayed by Liu, intensify the antagonist's force with severity and vigilance. Her trait emphasize rigidity and emotional intensity. If Hespera represent calculated authority, Callisto represent a uncompromising retribution. Together they reflect the tradition resisting change, challenging the legitimacy of the younger hero's power. Finally, Anthea, played by Rachel Zegler, introduced Nose to the conflict. Her personality is more empathetic and conflicted compared to her sisters. Anthea archetype aligned with the bridge character, someone torn between loyalty and consequence. This internal tension adds complexity to the opposition and softens the rigid moral divide. For a reviewer perspective, The film's success when it's highlight these personality contra Billy's insecurity and Hespera certainty, Faraday enthusiasm against looming danger, Mary's maturity against youthful hesitation. The ensemble structure allows multiple archetypes to interact, reinforcing the film's broader theme of growth, belonging, and responsibility. Ultimately, the characters are less about flawless heroism and more about emotional evaluation. Their strength and weakness feel intentionally balanced. While the spectral drive the plot, it is the personality is vulnerable, confident, conflicted, and determined that anchor the story and give its lasting emotional resonance. In Shazam, Fury of the Gods, the acting performance play a crucial role in maintaining the film's emotional balance between fantasy, spectacle, and heartfelt scenery. While the movie features large-scale visual effects and mythological conflict, it ultimately depends on the cast to humanize the story. From an emotional standpoint, the performance vary in intensity and tone, but they collectively shape the film's warmth and accessibility. At its center is Zachary Levi as Shazam with Asher Angle portraying teenage Billy Batson. He brings an exaggerated physical enthusiasm to the superhero persona. His performance leans heavily into comedic timing, expressive reaction, and playful body language. Emotionally, Levi emphasizes the awkwardness of a teenager inside an adult body. His wide eye delivery energetic speech pattern reinforces the character insecurity masked by bravado. At times, this heightened performance style may feel intentionally over the top, but it aligns with the film's lighter tone. Levy's emotional range is most affected in quieter scenes where vulnerability replaces humor in moments of doubt or fear. He softens his delivery, allowing the audience to glimpse the fragile confidence beneath the costume. Asher's Angel, portraying Billy in his teenage form, provide a more restrained emotional presence. Angel's performance is retrospective and grounded, contrasted with Levy's exaggerated superhero persona. This dual actor dynamic create an interesting emotional split. While the characters are meant to be the same person, the tonal difference between the angel's seriousness and Levy's playfulness can feel slightly disjointed. However, Angel's subtitle portray of insecurity strengthens the thematic core. His quiet expression of fear and longing help anchor the story in emotional realism. The supporting cast contribute significantly to the film's emotional warmth. Jack Dylan Grazer as Faraday Freeman deliver one of the most emotionally engaging performances. Grazer combines humor with earnest vulnerability, especially in scenes that explore loneliness and admiration. His delivery feels natural and unforced, making his emotional beat resonate. When Faraday confronts danger or expresses hope, the sincerity in Gazier's performance deepen the audience investment as a superhero version of Faraday. Adam performance deepen the audience investment as the superhero version of Friday. Adam Brody mirrors the youthfulness enthusiasm while maintaining a playful charm. Grace Caroline Curry as Mary Broomfield offer a more mature emotional tone. Her performance feels steady and thoughtfulness reflecting Mary's responsible nature. Curry's convey internal conflict through controlled expression rather than dramatic outbursts. This subtitle adds depth, especially in scenes where Mary is wrestled with choices about her future. She becomes a quiet emotional anchor with the ensemble. Among the villains, Helen Mirren as Hespera brings gravitas and authority. Mirren's performance is mild and composed, contrasting sharply with the youthful energy of the hero. She delivers dialogue with clarity and restraint, projecting calm power rather than explosive rain. Emotionally, her portrait feels dignified and deliberate. Marin elevates the antagonist role by grounding it in convention rather than caricature. Lucy Liu as Calespo take a more intense approach. Her performance lean into severity and commanding presence. Liu's control, physicality, and frame vocal delivery create a sense of unwavering determination. While her character emotional range is narrower, her focus intensity reinforcing the mythic scale of the conflict. Rachel Zegler as Anthea introduces a softer emotional texture. Zegler's performance convey empathy and hidden conflict, adding nuances to the antagonistic side. Her expressive eyes and gentle vocal shift communicate hesitation and moral complexity. She provides a counterbalance to the rigidity of her sister, allowing the audience to see vulnerability even within composition. The chemistry among the Foster family remain one of the film's strongest emotional ascents. The ensemble interaction feel comfortable and familiar, reflecting established relationship. Group scenes carry a sense of shared history and the playful banter enhance authenticity. The chemistry is essential because it reinforces the central theme of belonging. Overall, the acting performance blend humor, vulnerability, and convention, while tonal difference occasionally create unevenness. The emotional sincerity of the cast ensure that the film heart remain intact. The lead and the supporting actor collectively sustain the balance between fantasy and relatability, allow the story emotional theme to resonate beyond its visual spectacle. In a film built around magical world, mythological god, and dragon-sized threat, realism might seem secondary. Yet this film finds its grounding not in physical plausibility but in emotional credibility. The realism of the story emerges through character development, believability of relationship, and the emotional range presenting by its central figure. While the world itself is fantastical, the film driving the character aim to feel authentic. Character development remain one of the film's more noticeable strengths, though it unfolds within a familiar superhero structure. Billy Batson arc center on insecurity and fear, inadequacy, rather than presenting a hero who begin confident and unwavering. The film lean into vulnerability, his anxiety about losing his family and not being good enough, give his journey a relatable foundation. Many viewers understand the pressure of expectation, whether from peer, family, or society. Billy's struggle reflects a real psychological experience, feeling unprepared for responsibility that others assume you can handle. However, the realism of his development is somewhat stylized. Emotional transition occur within the framework of blockbuster pacing. Moments of doubt and growth are present, but they are often resolved quickly to the film's energetic rhythm. This slightly compresses the psychological time, while the character emotional beats are sincere. They do not linger long enough to feel deeply introspective. Still, the effort to center the story around personal growth rather than pure spectacle add meaningful dimension. The believability of relationship play a crucial role in grounding the narrative. The Foster family dynamic feel authentic in tone even if heightened by the superhero circumstances. The banter among siblings, moment of disagreement, and expression of mutual support mirror real family interaction. This sense of familiarity enhances emotional realism. The characters do not behave like flawless heroes. They express frustration, jealousy, and affection in ways they resemble everyday sibling dynamic. Mary Broomfield arc for intensities carry a subtitle realism rooted in transitional anxiety. Her struggle to balance ambition with loyalty to family reflect a common young adult dilemma. Unlike purely fantastical conflict, this tension resonates with real life choices about independence and responsibility. Because her character is portrayed with restraint and maturity, her emotional experience feels grounded rather than exaggerated. The antagonist, by contrast, operate with less psychological note. Their motivation are rooted in mythological graveness and ideological rigidity. While this aligns with the epic fantasy tone, it limits emotional complexity. The villains feel symbolic rather than deeply human. Their convention is clear, but their inner vulnerability remain mostly unexplored. As a result, the realism of their emotional range is narrow compared to the protagonist's emotional range across the ensemble varies. Zachary Levi portray of Shazam lean heavily into comedic exaggeration, which occasionally stretches believability. His performance in emphasizing youthful excitement and insecurity, but at times the heightened delivery create a slight disconnect from the quieter emotional beat. In contrast, Asher's angel portrait of Billy in his teenage form feels more restrained and retrospective. This difference in tonal influence or realistic the emotional journey appear. The teenage version of Billy often feel more psychological grounded. Faraday Freeman emotional arc stand out for its sincerity. His mixture of admiration, vulnerability, and courage feel genuine. His emotional reaction where excitement or fear carry a natural quality that enhance believability. Faraday character reflect a wider emotional spectrum, moving fluidity between humor and heartfelt sincerity. Despite its fantastical setting, the film maintains emotional relatability through a theme of belonging and identity. The desire to hold on to family, the fear of growing apart, and the challenge of stepping into adulthood are experiences rooted in reality. Even when framed through magical battle, these concerns resonate because they mirror everyday human development. Overall, the realism in this film is emotional rather than situational. The word may be exaggerated, but the character, fear, and hope are recognizable. While some arc would benefit from deeper exploration, the film succeeds in offering believable motivation and a moderate emotional range. Its depth lies not in psychological complexity but in the sincerity of its central relationship and authenticity of its coming of age theme. This was produced with a substantial studio budget typical of mid to large scale superhero film released in the early 2020s. Industry estimate placed the production cost in the range of approximately $110 million to $130 million, excluding marketing and distribution expenses. While this figure is lower than budget of some flagship superhero installment that often exceed $200 million, it still represents a significant financial commitment. The film occupies an interesting middle ground, not a modest production by any means, yet known in position as one of the studio's more expensive tentpole projects. A considerable portion of the budget was allocated to visual effects as a fantasy driven superhero story featuring mythological power, large scale action sequence, and computer generated creatures. The film required extensive CGI work, superhero transformation, magical ability, and elaborate battle environment demand high-end digital compositing and post-production refinement. Visual effect budget for film in this category often consume a large percentage of overall production spending, sometimes reaching 30 to 40% of total cost. In this case, they need to create convincing and mythical antagonist and supernatural set piece, likely accounting for substantial share of the financial resources. Another major cost factor was cast compensation. While the film did not rely on extremely high salary command by some veterinary and A-list star, it still featured returning lead actor and established supporting performances. Franchise continuity typically result in salary increases for returning cast members, especially after the commercial success of an earlier installment. Contract renegotiations, bonuses, and ensemble cost in agreements collectively add to the financial structure. Although these expenses were likely controlled relatively to the larger franchise entry in the broader superhero market, they nonetheless represent a meaningful percentage of the overall production budget. Production designs and practical set construction also require notable investment. Unlike certain contemporary blockbusters that rely heavily on ground screen environment, this film incorporated a mix of practical set and digital extension, creating immersive fantasy setting compete with stylized architecture, mythological motif, and destruction sequence demand careful art direction and physical built out. Costumes are another essential financial component. Superhero suits require durable material, multiple duplicate for stunt work, and detailed craftsmanship to balance realism with comic book vibrancy. Upgraded or redesigned costume further increase design and fabrication expenses. Location shooting and logistical coordination and contributing additional even when filming take place primarily on soundstage. Large scale action film require complex scheduling. Strong coordinated team, second unit, director, and specialized equipment. Insurance costs for stunt heavy production are also high than coverage. Both safety outside and technical staffing requirement. These behind the scene logistic, mm, though less visible to audience, significantly influence total expenditure when compared to the other similar superhero film released during the same period. The budget of the film appear moderate rather than excessive. For example, flagship entries from larger interconnected cinematic universe often operate 80 to $120 million, and the contrast this film estimated cost suggests a strategic attempt to balance spectacle with financial restraint. The studio likely aimed to maintain franchise viability while assuming the highest tier of financial risk associated with large ensemble crossover globally scale storytelling. Marketing costs, though separate from production expenses, also shape overall financial expectations. Major superhero releases commonly require global promotional campaigns that can approach or even match half the production budget. While exact figures vary, marketing for a film of this scale could plausibly fall within $80 million to $100 million worldwide. When combined with production spending, the total investment becomes significantly higher, increasing pressure on box office performance to ensure profitability. Overall, the production budget reflects a careful, calculated investment in spectacle, cast continuity, and franchise maintenance. It demonstrates a commitment to maintaining high visual standard and thematic consistency while avoiding the extreme financial exposure associated with the most expensive superhero film. The film financial framework illustrates how mid-tier superhero entries attempt to balance ambition, audience expectation, and future responsibility within an increasingly competitive blockbuster marketplace. Regionally, the domestic market has traditionally been a major revenue source for superhero films, especially those based on well-known comic property. Our audience behavior in North America has shifted in recent years. Theater have experienced fluctuating attendance pattern, and a mid-tier superhero entries have faced increased competition not only from other theatrical release but also from streaming platform. For a film position as a light-hearted, family-friendly superhero adventure, sustaining strong domestic number will typically depend on positive word of mouth and repeat viewing. Instead, the film experienced notable week-to-week drop, suggesting that initial curiosity did not fully translate into sustained audience enthusiasm. When compared to its 2019 pre-Sandbery, the contrast between more pronounced. The first Shazam film earned more than $140 million domestically, more than double the sequel within the same year. Sequels often rely on goodwill generated by earlier installment, but maintaining that level of interest requires strong marketing, positive reception, and a sense of eventuality. In this case, the sequel did not achieve the same cultural impact or urgency that typically drive higher domestic box office total. Looking at broader genre comparison, many superhero films released in the same decade have achieved significantly higher domestic earnings, even those that receive mixed reviews. Large ensemble entries with an interconnected cinematic universe often surpass $200 million domestically, while Shazam has always occupied a somewhat smaller scale corner of the superhero landscape. The domestic performance still fell on the lower end of the expectation for a modern comic book sequel with a substantial production budget. This places it closer to underperforming franchise entry rather than breakout success. Audience trend also play a role. Family attendance pattern can be sensitive to competition release timing. When multiple family-friendly or action-driven films are available simultaneously, viewers often prioritize project receive as much see event. Additionally, superhero fatigue has become a topic of discussion among industry observers. As the market becomes saturated with comic adaptation, domestic audience may become more selective, choosing only the most highly anticipated release for theatrical viewing while waiting to stream other at home. Other con Another contextual factor involves tone and branding. The Shazam series blends superhero spectacle with comedy and youthful energy. While this approach differentiated from darker genre counterpart, it may also limit its appeal to older demographic who gravitate toward more dynamic or interconnected storyline. Domestic audience tend to respond strongly to crossover element and share universe development, and film perceived as standalone or less essential, sometimes genre low ticket sale. The domestic box office performance reflect a combination of original comedic trend, franchise comparison, and evolving theatrical habit. Although the film secured a respectable opening and briefly top weekend chart, and its total North America earning ultimately signal modern rather than robust sport. Within the context of the contemporary superhero cinema, the domestic result illustrates the challenge facing sequels that must balance familiarity, innovation, and market competition in a rapidly changing entertainment environment. This film is generated approximately 75 to 80 million dollar international market, meaning territories outside the United States and Canada accounted for a highly larger share of its total worldwide earning than the domestic region. In percentage term, overseas market contributed a bit more than half of the global box office. While this distribution is common for modern Hollywood blockbuster, the overall international total remain modest when measured against expectation for a superhero sequel with a nine-figure production budget. Looking region by region, performance varied considerably. In Europe, the film delivered moderate but not exceptional return. The United Kingdom was one of the stronger contributors, reflecting that market consistent interest in America's superhero franchise. Other European territories such as France, Germany, Italy, and Spain added incremental revenue even through non-emerge as breakout market. The film performs steadily rather than spectacularly, suggesting a level of brand recognition without overwhelming enthusiasm. In many of these territories, competition from other limited its ability to dominate screen for multiple weeks. In Asia, results were more subdued. China, often a decisive market for large-scale superhero film, generated a relatively low gross compared to past comic book release from major studios. This outcome reflects broader shift in audience performance within the Chinese market, where locally produced film and select global franchise tend to outperform mid-tier superhero entry. Other Asian territories such as South Korea and Japan contributed smaller amount, again reflecting moderate engagement rather than blockbuster level demand. The character global brand power, while recognizable, did not appear strong enough to generate major momentum across the region. Latin America provided some support, with countries like Mexico and Brazil contributed respectable figure. Historical superhero films have performed reliably in this territory, and sequel benefited from that baseline interest. However, even here the earning did not reach the height seen by large ensemble superhero film and installment more deeply integrated into expensive cinematic universe. The reception appeared consistent with the film's overall market position, familiar, accessible, but not an unmissable event. Market reception internationally mirror domestic trend. Audience word of mouth and critical response abroad were generally mixed to moderately positive but not strong enough to create sustained momentum. Superhero film often depend on opening weekend impact, followed by steady performance driven by social media conservation and fan enthusiasm. In this case, international market shows similar drop of uh, pattern to those seen in North America, suggested limited repeat viewing or border cross demographic appeal. Marketing strategy also influence overseas result. International campaign for superhero film typically emphasize spectacle action, recognizable franchise branding, while the film deliver large scale fantasy visual. It lack the crossover appeal or narrative connection that often drive heightened global anticipation. In market where interconnected storytelling is a major, standalone sequence without clear ties to larger cinematic development sometimes struggle to generate urgency among casual viewers. Promotional message may have highlighted humor and family themes, but these elements do not always translate equally across cultures. Another contextual factor is the evolving global theatrical landscape. Post pandemic attendance pattern and the expansion of the streaming platform have changed how international audience approach mid-tier franchise film. Viewers may reserve theater visit for the most anticipated blockbuster while waiting for digital release window for other. The shift can be disappropriately affect sequel perceived as entertaining but not essential. Overall, the international box office performance reflect a balanced yet restrained global reception. While overseas markets slightly outperform domestic totals in percentage terms, the absolute number remain moderate relative to genre standard. The film achieved worldwide reach but did not achieve the level of international breakout success that characterized the most commercially dominant superhero entries of this era. This film earned approximately 133 to 135 million dollar worldwide by the end of its theatrical run. Its total combined both domestic revenue from the United States and the Canada international running from global market while closing the 100 million dollar mark may sound substantial in isolation. The context of production cost, distribution expenses, and studio revenue split significantly change the financial interpretation. In the modern blockbuster landscape, especially within the superhero genre, worldwide gross must be evaluated against overall investment rather than view as pure profit. The global audience for the film was broad but moderate in run turnout. North America contributed a little under half of the worldwide total, with overseas markets making up slightly more than half. This distribution is common for contemporary superhero film, which often rely heavily on international audience to boost total revenue. However, strong global participation typically mean total well above $300 million for financially successful entries in this genre. In this case, the global audience turnout was present but not overwhelming, indicating steady interest rather than event level engagement. Break even analysis in the film industry goes beyond simply matching the production budget with an estimated production cost in the range of $110 million to $130 million. One might assume that grossing $130 million worldwide will nearly cover expenses. However, that assumption does not count for marketing and distribution. Large scale superhero film often require global promotional campaign that can range from $80 million to $100 million or more. These expenses include advertising, international press tour, digital marketing, theater placement fees, and promotional partnership. Additionally, box office gross does not translate directly into studio profit. Theater retain a percentage of ticket sale and the studio share varies by region. Domestically, studios may receive roughly 50 to 55% of the ticket revenue, while international split can be lower, particularly in certain territories. In markets such as China, percentage return to the studio can be significantly reduced. As a result, a film that grosses $135 million globally might return only around half of that amount to the studio after exhibitors take their share. Considering these revenue split and estimated marketing expense, analysts often suggest that a film with a $120 million production budget would need to gross roughly 2 to 2.5 times its production cost to comfortably break even. That would place the break even threshold closer to the $250 million to $300 million worldwide. By comparison, the film actual global total fell well short of that range. This suggests that financial revenue alone was unlikely to cover full production and marketing investment. However, theoretical box office is only one component of the total revenue stream. Studio also generate income from digital rental, premium video on demand release, streaming licensing agreement, physical media sales, and television broadcasting right. In that case of a superhero property connected to a large studio ecosystem, streaming platform placement can help offset theoretical shortfall. Ancillary market include merchandising and international distribution. Packaging contribute additional revenue over time. While these systems can reduce overall financial losses, they rarely transform a significantly underperforming theoretical run into a major profit generator. Distribution costs also factor into the financial equation. Global release strategy involves dubbing, subtitling, logistics coordination, print and advertising expenses, and international market agreement. Major territory require localized marketing effort tailored to culture preferences, for further increasing expenditure when global performance does not meet projection. These distribution investment amplify the gap between gross revenue and net return. Overall, the worldwide gross reflect modern global interest but fall below typical profitability benchmark for a superhero sequel of this scale. Break-even analysis suggests that the film faced financial challenge theoretically, with profitability relying heavily on secondary revenue stream rather than box office alone. This film presents a clear case study in the financial pressure facing mid-tier superhero sequel in the modern theatrical market. From a purely theoretical perspective, profitability appears unlikely when comparing revenue against total cost. With a production budget estimated between $110 million and $130 million and worldwide box office earning around $133 to $135 million, the gross revenue falls short of what would typically be required for break even. To understand why, it is important to examine how revenue is divided. Box office total represent gross ticket sale, not the amount returned directly to the studio. Domestic theater usually retain roughly half of ticket revenue, while international split can be in certain overseas markets. Studio may receive significantly less than 50%. When these distribution split are applied, the studio actual share of the worldwide gross would likely fall well below the headline figure. This means the studio probably recoup only the portion of the production cost from theatrical exhibition alone. Marketing and distribution expenses further complicate the equation. Global promotional campaign for superhero film often cost tens of millions of dollars, sometimes approaching or exceeding $80 million. When advertising, press tour, and theater placement in international promotional effort are added to production costs, total investment can raise substantially for a film in this budget. The industry analyst often suggests that it would need to earn at least $250 million worldwide to break even theoretically. Since the film worldwide gross did not reach that threshold, theoretical profitability was unlikely. However, profitability analysis does not end with box office performance. Ancillary income stream play a significant role in offsetting losses. This includes digital rental, premium video on demand sale, physical media purchases, international licensing agreement, airline and television broadcast light, and eventual streaming platform placement. As part of a major studio border content library, the film likely generated revenue through licensing arrangement and subscription platform engagement. While these sources can often soften the financial impact, that rarely compensate entirely for large theoretical shortfall. A return of investment is therefore expected to be low or potentially negative in the short term. ROI measure profit relatively to total investment. In this case, a combination of moderate box office performance and high upfront cost limit the margin for positive return. Even if in salary market contributes steady income over several years, the overall return may remain modest compared to more successful superhero entries that significantly exceed their production budget. In conclusion, when comparing reverse revenue versus cost, the film likely did not achieve the theoretical profitability and face financial challenge relatively to its scale. Ancillary income may reduce overall losses, but the ROI appear limited. The film financial outcome highlight the risk involved in producing franchise sequel without securing the strong global turnout typically required for sustainable blockbuster success. It received mixed but generally mild audience reaction, reflecting a divided response across different viewers demographic. While some moviegoers appreciated its light-hearted tone and family oriented humor, others expressed disappointment comparing it to both its predecessor and other contemporary superhero film. The overall reaction was not strongly polarized, but it lacked the enthusiastic momentum that typically fuel sustained audience management. From a demographic perspective, younger viewers and families appeared to respond more positively than older audience. The film comedic style, colorful action sequence, and focus on youthful energy align well with teenager and preteen viewers. Families seeking accessible superhero entertainment without heavy thematic intensity found it suitable and entertaining. However, older superhero fans, particularly those who favor interconnected storytelling or darker, more complex narrative, seamless impressed. This generational divide influenced word of mouth trend and contributed to moderate rather than overwhelming public enthusiasm. Viewers' feedback often highlighted the film humor as both a strength and limitation. Spotter enjoyed the playful tone and exaggerated character dynamic, describing it as fun and easy to watch. The emphasis on comedic timing, magical spectacle provided moments of genuine entertainment. At the same time, some viewers felt the humor was inconsistent or less sharp than in the original installment. Comparison to the first film were frequent, with many suggesting that the sequel lacked the freshness and charm that made its predecessor stand out. Engagement levels on social media and online discussion platforms reflected this mixed reception. Initial reaction during opening weekend show curiosity and optimism, especially among fans of the original film. However, sustained online boost did not maintain high intensity in the week following release. In the modern entertainment environment, strong audience engagement often manifests through memes, repeat discussion, fan theories, and viral clips. While the film generated conservation, it did not create a lasting cultural movement or widespread digital excitement. Another factor influencing reaction was franchise or context. Some viewers approached the film with uncertainty regarding the broader direction of its cinematic universe, while audiences are unsure about the franchise's long-term continuity. Emotional investment can weaken. This uncertainty may have affected overall enthusiasm, particularly among dedicated superhero followers who prioritize interconnected narrative. Audience satisfaction scores indicated modern approval rather than strong acclaim. Many viewers describe the film as enjoyable but forgettable, suggesting that it provided entertainment value without leaving a deep emotional impression. Repeat viewing appear limited compared to high performing superhero release, indicated that while audience did not reject the film outright, they were not compelled to revisit it. General audience reaction were balanced but subdued. Families and younger viewers responded positively to its tone and accessibility, while older or more franchise focused audience show more preservation. Viewers' feedback emphasize humor and spectacle as highlight, yet broader engagement remained modern. The film ultimately achieved acceptance rather than passionate support, resulting in a reception that was steady but not strongly enthusiastic across the global audience landscape. This film demonstrated how box office performance can significantly shape public perception, sometimes as much as the critical reception. When a film underperforms financially, audience often interpret that audience as a reflection of equality, even if reviews are mixed rather than overwhelming negative. In this case, modern critical reception combined with lower than expected earning reinforce a narrative of disappointment. The box office number become the part of the conversation, influencing how viewers discuss the film's success or failure. Critical reception alone might have positioned the movie as a decent but unremarkable sequel. Once the financial result fell short of industry expectation, perception shifted toward labeling it as a commercial misstep. In the modern blockbuster environment, profitability is frequently equated with culture impact. A strong box office can elevate a film reputation, while weaker earning can amplify its perceived flaw. Even casual viewers who may not closely follow reviews often associate lower grosses with reduced quality or relevance. Studios' reputation also play a role in shaping perception. From a major studio managing a broader superhero universe, financial outcome are viewed as indicator of brand strength. When one's installment struggle, it can prompt discussion about franchise direction, strategic planning, or audience fatigue. The film box office performance therefore contributed not only to opinion about the movie itself but also to commentary about the studio handling of the superhero properties. In genre comparison, the contrast become even sharper. Other superhero film with larger global total set high benchmark when compared to the stronger performance. The film earning appeared modest, reinforcing the idea that it failed to meet generous, and ultimately the box office became intervened with audience judgment, shaping perception beyond the content of the film alone. Thematically, the film continued to explore ideas of responsibility, identity, and belonging. Its emphasis on chosen family remained a strength, offering heartfelt momentum beneath the superhero surface. However, the thematic development lacked depth compared to its potential. When enjoyable and visually appealing, the film ultimately feel entertaining but not transformative within the genre. It is best suited for viewers who enjoy light-hearted superhero adventure within a strong comedy tone. Families with older children and teenagers are likely to participate in its genetic style, colorful visual, and playful humor. The film leans heavily into fantasy spectre rather than intense drama, making it accessible to audience who prefer entertainment that feel fun, fast-paced, and emotionally uplifting rather than dark or psychologically fan of superhero comedies will find the movie appealing, especially those who enjoy the first installment and a Toronto story about teamwork and chosen family. The emotional resonance center are on belonging, loyalty, and growing into responsibility theme and connect well with younger viewer navigating identity and friendship. Audience who appreciate exaggerated reaction, magical action sequence, and an ensemble dynamic will likely find it entertaining. However, the film may not satisfy viewers who prefer grounded realism or deeply layered storytelling with the superhero genre. Those who favor darker tone, intricate world building, a strong tie to a larger interconnected cinematic universe might find the experience less impactful. The comedic approach can sometimes undercut dramatic tension, which may disappoint audience seeking high emotional stake or mature thematic exploration. In terms of age group, it works best for pre-teens, teenager, and adult, or comfortable with comic style action and fantasy violence presented in a stylized non-gritty manner. Very young children might find certain action scenes intense, while older seekers expected a serious superhero epic may fall under film. Ultimately, the film is recommended for audience seeking colorful escapism and light emotional warmth rather than profound cinematic depth.